many things an experienced Russian tortoise keeper might warn you about to not get for your Russian tortoise and its enclosure. And today we're going to be talking about 5 of those things. And I have seen some of these things in your enclosures, guys, so definitely stay tuned. Obviously, I'm going to trickle in some opinions here, so let me know your feedback. Let's hop into it. Hey guys, how's it going? You know, it's the beginning of a new year. I'll be completely bald. Yellow Ackie, Reptile. Hey guys, how's it going? As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Russian tortoise care today, specifically things you should not buy for your Russian tortoise. Now this one was a little harder to put together than the Ackie Monitor version I did a few weeks back, but I can tell you that the ones that are not opinion pieces are definitely very important and things you should know. And most of these are elements I did not cover in past Russian tortoise videos, so you're going to see a lot of new information in this video. So let's get to it, and let's start with our number 5. Starting off with an interesting one, our number 5, it is rocks. Now people will put rocks in their Russian tortoise enclosure. These will probably be roughly the same size as the body of the tortoise. Now there's a couple reasons why I just wouldn't go ahead and do this. For one, Russian tortoises, despite their bulkiness, are pretty good escape artists, and typically people will gather those rocks together in some formation along the wall of the enclosure, and this could give them a little bit of a boost to get out of their enclosure if it's within some distance. So you are more prone to escapees with rocks. And also, and more importantly, rocks can be kind of harmful to your Russian tortoise. Now, especially because the ground is somewhat uneven and it's much more rough. When they climb on it, there's going to be a lot of bumping around. And if they're really kind of different in height, you might have some flipping, and ultimately this could damage their shell a little bit, leave some scuffs, and you really just don't want that for your Russian tortoise, especially when it's young and growing. Now, many times I said it's great to have different terrain in your Russian tortoise enclosure, and having some rougher type terrain, I guess is the best way to put it, is fine and great, but I'd rather use slate type stuff. Things that have a smooth surface that you can utilize, like what I have in my Russian tortoise enclosure. I think that's much better than getting actual rocks and putting it in there and trying to make some formation in there. I just don't really see a purpose to that, and I think there's much better ways that go along with that rocky element that you can do to approach that concept and match that concept. So I would go with those different cement type blocks, I guess. Are they blocks, guys? I would get one of these right here. This is what I use. It works perfectly, and as mentioned, they kind of go along with the rock feel and theme. So if you do want rocks, this goes pretty well with it, and essentially is pretty much the same thing in an enclosure. So don't get rocks. That is something you don't want to buy for them. Get those instead. Also, before you run out and get one of these babies, go ahead and hit that subscribe button in the lower right hand corner. Hit that bell as well for the latest on the channel. We do Russian tortoise videos about 2 times a month, maybe 3 if you're lucky. So definitely subscribe for more. We already have many Russian tortoise videos. Thanks, guys. At number 4, I want to talk about bowls. Now, I briefly talked about something similar to what I'm going to be talking about in a past video about water bowls, but we're going to just talk about bowls in general. Let's start with the water bowl, since this is something I hinted on before. Many water bowls, and this is something that experienced Russian tortoise keepers will also say, are not really appropriately made for Russian tortoises and a lot of just general tortoise species. One I have found that works particularly well, this one right here, this is the style I would go for. If you can find anything like this, I will put this exact one in a link in the description. But the beach element of this, how it kind of just flattens out and your tortoise can walk right into it, that is what you want for your Russian tortoise. Russian tortoises love to kind of get a drink while sitting in the water, and it allows for easy access here. That's pretty much number 1 reason why I like this. So they could climb right in, take a little drink while sitting in there. It reduces on the amount of time you need to take them out and bathe them yourself, because they can just self-bathe while sitting in there. So part 1 for this is that you want to go with a beach style type water bowl. This is what I hinted at previously. Part 2 is that you should not be getting food bowls. You should be putting these on those slate type rocks we were talking about previously. Now, why do that? Number 1, Russian tortoises are grazers, so they're used to grazing around and not eating from a bowl. And number 2, you want it on a rougher surface so you could trim their nails down and their beak when they are eating. Both grazing and trimming beak and nails is something we've talked about in the past and how important this is, so you really want to provide many different avenues and resources for this to happen, and this is probably the top number 1 way to get them to trim their nails and their beak right here. So that's why this is important. That's why it's our number 4. Moving on, number 3, this one, I have to say is probably going to be a little controversial since I have seen a lot of this in Russian tortoise enclosures, and that is ramps. Now, I'm not going to say this is the worst thing you could do. This is definitely a very opinionated one coming from myself, but I just see really no good coming from them. Yes, they are skilled climbers, and you probably can, like I said, and what I do with my terrain is have different vertical levels and such like that. You can replicate that without making it a steep ramp. It is just too prone for them to flip over and hurt themselves. Now, you can probably do a ramp. I've seen pictures of it where they have sort of guardrails and stuff like that. That works definitely a lot better than just an open-ended ramp without any protection on it. So maybe that's a good way to go about it if you really insist on doing a ramp. But ultimately, I just don't like anything that's steep, and you got to make sure you have proper grip. I just don't see it as a good thing to buy for your Russian tortoise enclosure. Like I was saying, instead find a different way to include higher vertical space, lower vertical space, dips and heights. All right, thanks, car. Find a way to achieve that without utilizing some sort of ramp. You can use the blocks like we talked about in number 5 and a little bit in number 4 to raise them and lower them a bit, and that will achieve what you want right there. You don't really need to achieve something that steep either, which is how a lot of ramps are designed for Russian tortoises. They don't need to climb at a 45-degree angle. They just need some distinction in vertical height and depth and such like that. So to wrap this all in a nice, neat little package, I just would not get a ramp. There is too much danger associated with it for Russian tortoises. They are not graceful, and when they fall, they really fall, and they can really hurt themselves. So I just don't think that's the way to go about adding vertical enrichment for Russian tortoises. I think there's plenty of other avenues you can go with, and I think ramps just are not that way. So that's number 3. Number 2 is definitely one of the most important ones here, and that's buying and utilizing a dry substrate. The most probable one that you would probably get is sand. This is problematic for many reasons. For one, like I detailed in my most recent common mistakes video for Russian tortoises, you want to have some level of humidity in your Russian tortoise enclosure, going as far as even occasionally spraying down the entire enclosure even, or offering a consistent and constant moist hide. Those you definitely want. Now, in order to achieve a stable level of humidity, or something that's going to gradually get less and less humid instead of immediately, you need the proper substrate in there to soak up some of that moisture and even retain it for a longer period of time in the deeper depths of that substrate. With your drier reptile substrates such as sand, you're going to allow moisture to escape much more easily if you use it in higher quantities. Now, you can use sand in some regards. I find sand very helpful at making substrate more grainy instead of having chunks, so even in humid enclosures, I'm saying, so I do that. I do have play sand in my Ackie Monitor enclosures, and they do have a high humidity deeper and deeper into their substrate. It also is really good at consistent burrow keeping. It can, when it's moist, be very good at moving around and keeping its shape. So there are advantages in humid environments with play sand, but in Russian tortoises, their burrows are a little bit different. They don't need to exactly hold formation and be like that, nor with their grazing is sand really that great because it can stick very easily to the food, and typically that's not a problem, but if you have something off husbandry-wise, that can definitely not be good for them, and overall, if you can escape that, you probably want to. So we talked about rocks, we talked about bowls, we talked about ramps, and lastly, we talked about dry substrate. Finally, at number 1, we are going to be talking about screen glass enclosure. Now, if any of these are ones I've talked about in the past, it is definitely this one right here. Screens, number 1, because you do want to keep in some humidity in their substrate. You don't want to have it too aerated, so that's where the screen aspect comes in. And glass, that is just, for many reasons, a bad idea. And honestly, I probably wasn't going to include this one, but thinking on it more and more, I just get so many comments and inquiries on Russian tortoises being able to live in your typical Exoterra or something similar to that Zoo-Med tank enclosures, and it can't because of the screen, but more importantly, and more of a reason, is because those enclosures are not big enough by far, and you don't want them glass surfing, pushing on the glass. You don't want them doing that. Russian tortoises, one of the biggest things any experienced keeper will tell you is that you want to keep the glass out of their sight. You don't want them to be seen out of their enclosure. Russian tortoises are very driven, and with their skilled climbing, if they can see out of their enclosure, they will make quite an effort, overdoing it type of effort, to climb out and get around that glass. So you don't want to torture them with that. I put my glass up high enough on my enclosure, in my enclosure, to where Tortellini, my Russian, cannot see out of it and peep out of it, and he's totally fine. I'm actually going to be putting him in a new enclosure soon. That's a trough type setup that he won't even be close to peering out of it. So please guys, I'm going to keep this one short. Do not put them in a screen glass enclosure. They are too small. It won't hold proper humidity, and you don't want to torture them with being able to see out of their enclosure. Just do something else or don't get them. That's really what it comes down to. Anyway guys, that's our 5 things to not buy for your Russian tortoise and its enclosure. Let me know if you have any things you would suggest people not buy in a comment below. Leave a like as well and subscribe if you haven't. I appreciate you watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. See you guys.